What's going on, everybody? It's Wednesday. Yes, it is Wednesday. That means a few things. It means that I'm just a couple more days from my 2-week winter vacation, and I am very excited about that. But it also means it's Q&A day. Now, again, your questions are always great. And there are weeks that there are just a handful of questions, and there are weeks that there are a bunch. And whenever I say, hey, yeah, I had a bunch of questions this week, the following week, you all go, oh, we're asking too many questions, so I'm not gonna ask a question. And then I hardly have any. I did have a lot of really good questions this week. That doesn't mean don't send me questions for next week. Still send them. If I responded and said, this is a really good question, I'm gonna use this soon, and then I don't use it, don't just like toss it away and say, oh, you didn't like it. No, it just means I'm trying to mix things up. I'm trying to mix up topics. I'm trying to mix up the different people asking the questions. Just ask it again. Ask it again. And I will get to it. I will get to it. And I love the questions that you all ask. If you have a question and you've not yet ever asked a question, I would love it. I would be honored if you took the time to ask a question for the first time. Again, all you do is down below in the comments, you just simply type your question. You don't have to say, this is my question, Greg. Just say, hey, Greg, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? And then I'll respond. Now I'm gonna get 10 people that are gonna type the question down below that just says, here's my question, blah, blah, blah. No, you know what I mean. Just ask the question down below, whatever the question is, all right? So, more questions this week that are great. It's actually, 2 questions were put into one because they were similar, so it's actually 6 questions this week, 5 responses to those questions. Let's take a look at the first question right now.
The Babe Ruth rookie went for $7 million. Estimates thought it might be a $10 million card. Does a lower auction price have any impact negatively on the hobby?
Okay. Awesome question. I think this was in the news. A lot of people talked about it. A lot of people were predicting what it would end at. I was on a stream with some guys the other day and they asked, hey, what do you think this is going to end at, the auction for this Babe Ruth card? And I said, 11 million was my guess. Why did I pick 11 million? I have no idea. I don't think any of us had an idea what it would actually go for. Am I surprised it went for way less? Not really. Would I have been surprised if it went for way more than that? Not really. It's just really a matter of what 2 people are willing to pay for something, right? And one of the things I mentioned on this particular stream when we were talking about it was, you're not just bidding on a card here, you're bidding on being in the news. Like ESPN covered this card auction, right? So you're going to be on an ESPN article. And for a lot of people, not me, but for a lot of people, that's part of the cool factor of making this bid. So we say, why did it go less than the estimates? Now, first of all, how did people come up with the estimates? So it came in less than the estimates. So, is the auction house the one that came up with the estimate? Because if they're the ones that came up with the estimate, of course they're gonna estimate it to be high because they're trying to get the ceiling high on the card so that they could, or the floor high on the card so that they could try to sell it for more. So, experts, who are the experts? What expert said it was gonna go for more than it went for? So I don't really take that into account too much. The other thing is people say, well, is it showing that the card economy is weak and people aren't spending as much on cards? No, I don't think it does. Because if you're willing to spend $7 million on a card, the economy is the least of your concerns, right? Like, the economy does not affect you when you have $7 million to spend on a sports card. So I don't think that this is a reflection on the economy. Now, I'm sure there are people throwing rotten, tomatoes at the screen right now and saying they disagree with me. That's fine. But I think it's like bidding on a sports team. When rich people, when billionaires are bidding on sports teams, money's not really that big of a deal, you know? It's just not, because, you know, whether something goes for 3 billion or 3.2 billion, they don't really even notice. And so I don't think someone who's spending $7 million on a Babe Ruth card notices. So why do I think it went for what it went for? There's a reason that the Mickey Mantle card is as famous as it is and as popular as it is. And there's a reason why the Michael Jordan rookie card is as famous as it is and as popular as it is. And you can kind of go through the sports and talk about some of the big famous cards. I mean, even if you're talking about like the Honus Wagner card, it's not just the player, and it's not just the rarity. It's the beauty of the card. It's the beauty of the Michael Jordan rookie card is beautiful. It's an iconic pose of Jordan on a beautiful card. The Mickey Mantle 52 Topps is a beautiful card of an insanely popular player. So it has like all the check marks. It's like, you know, it's beautiful, it's a popular player, it has everything. Now, if we look at this Babe Ruth card, first of all, I wish my cards got graded with the same grader that gave that the grade that it got, because that looked like a very favorable grade to me. So that I don't think that it had the eye appeal of the grade that it got. The other part of it is it's not like this super flattering picture. It's not like it's this iconic pose or close up where it's beautiful. And no offense to guy that just spent $7 million on it, but it's not really that attractive of a card, in my opinion. That's just me. And you're asking me, why do I think it went for less? So I think it went for less because people wanted it to go for Mickey Mantle 52 Topps money, and they wanted to go for Honus Wagner money. But even the Honus Wagner card, it's a beautiful card. It's beautiful. So it's beautiful, and it's Honus Wagner, and it's rare. The Mantle's not overly rare, and the Michael Jordan's not overly rare, but it's high demand, and one of the reasons for the high demand is it's beautiful. So one of the things I've talked about on my channel a lot, and you know, some of the questions I've asked you guys is, what do you think is the most beautiful card of all time? Well, one of the most beautiful cards of all time is the 52 Topps Mantle. Even if it wasn't Mantle, it's a beautiful card. But then it's also Mantle, and it's an iconic set, and it's, you know, impossible to find centered. And so I think that it's not a reflection on the economy as much. I mean, maybe a little. I don't think it's a reflection on Babe Ruth or people's interest in cards. I think more than anything, it was probably overgraded. It also is not the most amazing looking card of all time, especially when we compare it to some of these other iconic cards that go for crazy amounts of money. That's my take. But I don't take this and go, uh-oh, the card market's in trouble. That's not my takeaway from this. It might be for other people, though.
I have a lot of duplicate cards that I want to sell to purchase new cards. How do you sell cards, or what would you recommend in order to sell them? Also, I have some cards from my childhood, 1984 Fleer Update, 1985 Topps Tiffany, etc. Only a couple are graded. How do you recommend I explore moving these cards?
I mean, part of collecting is most of us end up selling at some point. We end up changing our interests. We say, I used to be into this, and now I'm into this, so I need to sell this so I can buy this, right? That's part of collecting, is the evolution of our interests. And our interests are always changing, so we're moving things around. It's just a little shell game of, where do you want your resources to be located in your collection? So it's very, very normal to sell. So where should somebody sell? It just depends. It depends so much on what it is. If it's a high-end card, like a really high-end card, like a really, really high-end card, you're probably going to go with one of the big auction houses that are going to promote it. And they're going to send out PR on it to get attention on it. Now, my guess is most of us don't fit that category, right? Most of us have just got, we're like, oh, I have two 1975 Topps Pete Rose cards. I don't need two of them, so I'm going to sell one of them. So how do I sell it, right? What's the best place to liquidate it? Now, for that, it also kind of depends. It depends on who you are. It depends on, the years of the stuff. It depends on everything. So I'm just going to be generic for a second. Generically speaking, if you have like a handful of cards that you want to liquidate, and they're all medium value, we'll say under $50, I would say listing them on something like eBay where you're going to get this wide audience, like a super wide audience. A lot of people go there to find stuff. Now, if it's something that's a pretty expensive card, like, over a couple $100, even over $100, $150, I think that it's probably best to grade it, because then more people will be willing to buy it and the demand for it will go up because people feel safer buying a graded card online than buying a raw card online. I have bought raw cards online that then showed up and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought this was. It's one of the reasons I don't buy super expensive raw stuff online. Graded stuff gives you, again, it's not going to be perfect. And I said this before, grades are a range. They're not a rule, right? It's like, to me, a 4 means somewhere between a 3 and a 5. It doesn't mean it's a 4. A 7 means it's somewhere between a 6 and an 8, not necessarily a 7. So I think if it's an expensive card and you're trying to get the most out of it, it's best to probably grade it and then list it on something like eBay still. Now, if you've got, a carton full, a shoebox full of, $5 and under cards from your childhood and you want to liquidate them, there's a lot of labor involved in taking the pictures, posting the pictures, packing them up, sending them off. In that case, I would consider doing like a ComC. Right, you just send 300 cards to ComC, and they take their little piece each. But it's probably easier to just liquidate them that way because of the amount of labor. And if you start going, well, how many cards can you process in an hour to list them, package them, ship them, and say you can do maybe 20, and you're selling $2 cards. Then you're getting $40 for an hour's worth of work and you're out the cards. So maybe the cards to you were worth $20, you're only getting $20 out of it. It might not be worth it. So if it's bulk stuff, I think ComC is a really good option that people should consider. So high-end stuff, like high-end stuff, like the stuff I'll never own, that's the stuff that I would go to the big auction houses. The stuff from, $3,000 to $100, I think you really got to get them graded. And then personally, I lean toward an eBay style auction house because it gets so many eyes on it. If it's stuff under $2 and it's a bulk of it, I'd probably send it all in bulk to like a ComC or if it's older, if it's vintage stuff, maybe a Greg Morris, to try to get them to take care of it and just not, because it's not worth the labor to get $1.50 for the card. But then if you're somebody who, has a presence, like if you're, if I were to sell a bunch of stuff, because a lot of you know me, and because a lot of you know me, if I said, hey guys, let's hang out, let's go over to, Whatnot, and let me sell some stuff. Like some of you might go over. I might get, 20 of you in to come over and watch, Whatnot sale. In fact, I'm going to do that over Christmas break just because I think it would be fun. So in the next couple weeks, I'm going to do that. I'll when I decide the date, I'll let you know, and I'll schedule it. It'll be fun. But it depends. If you're someone who's been in the hobby for a long, long time, and a lot of people know you, and because a lot of people know you because you've been in the hobby for a long, long time, and a bunch of your friends know some of your cool stuff, you could go into a Whatnot and you could do okay. So I think those are all things that are worth considering and factor into it. So I don't think there's an easy answer to these two questions. It really just depends. And that would kind of be some of the recommendations depending on the situation.
I like the TMCA and SSPC cards of the 70s and early 80s. To me, the photography of iconic players reminds me of the 53 Bowman color set. Why don't these cards have more popularity?
So this is something we have to talk about. We have to talk about this. The question, you said yourself, I really like these types of cards. Why aren't they worth more? If there's something you really like, and they're not worth a lot, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. That means you get to buy them for cheap. We have to be buying what we like, and we've heard that before. I've said it time and time again. Some people only want, cards that are really, really high condition. And some people are totally okay with super, super low condition. We can't be buying what other people like or what other people don't like. We have to be buying what we like. So if you like these, you should be buying them. And you're right, they do sell for pretty cheap. And at the moment, they're not super popular. Will they someday become popular? Maybe. Do I think the photography is good? I do think the photography is good. I do think that a lot of them are good-looking cards. So why aren't they worth more? I think there's two main reasons. And again, this is just Greg. This is just Greg's opinion. So if you don't agree, that's totally cool. But Greg's opinion of why these aren't worth more is there's two main reasons. Number one, people prefer by a lot plain day cards. And most of these cards are not plain day cards. They're cards of guys who are done playing, that were legends, that it's a way to get some of their cards because the cards from a long time ago are super expensive. So they're not reprints, but they're newer cards. And they're made to be collected, right? And when something is made to be collected, it tends to not be worth a fortune, right? That's just kind of the way that it is. For example, a lot of people say, hey, why aren't Perez Steel postcards worth more? I think they're cool. I think they're cool too. I own some. I just bought some recently. I bought several recently. But I think part of the reason they're not worth more is because they were created to be a collectible. It's like those little statues that you would see of like Ted Williams statue that'd be up on someone's shelf, like the little porcelain things or something. Those were made to be collectible. Therefore, I don't think they're really ever going to be worth a fortune. But the little cards that went in packs of cigarettes back in the early 1900s were not really designed to be collectible. Therefore, they are. So that's kind of part of it. I think the other part of it, and maybe the bigger part of it, is, well, maybe not the bigger part of it, but certainly part of it. I think that what happens is when those cards were coming out, that was in the era where cards were protected. So we think of like, I'll just throw out a couple of players. Like we think of a Ted Williams card. We think of a Ty Cobb card. We think of a Tris Speaker card. Most of those guys, their cards, were produced in a time where there was no way to protect the card, and nobody really thought that you should protect the card. But if we fast forward to when these cards were produced to be collected in an era where they were going into protection. They were going into sleeves. They were going into binders. They were going into cases. They were going into top loaders. They were going into card savers. They were going into protection because we thought that they would have value. And they do have some value. So most of them are fairly pristine. So that's part of it. That's one of the reasons I think a lot of this modern stuff, doesn't have a ton of upside, because every card that is pulled out, I mean, you see guys pulling cards out of packs with those latex gloves on. Like, what are we doing? And then it goes, we don't even want to get a fingerprint on it. It goes straight into the protection. And you're just like, but to a certain extent, these cards were made and produced in an era where you said, oh, we need to protect this. So you don't have the wide array of condition, which makes most of them in pretty good condition. So while there might be a fair amount of them out there, most of the ones that are out there are in pretty good condition. So I think that's part of it too. I hope I answered your question. I'm not 100% sure if I did a good job doing it, but that's kind of my take on why they're not worth more, even though I do think that they're pretty cool.
If you had a time machine and were able to travel back, which 3 games or historical events would you want to see?
Okay, so there's not a question that I've thought about more since I read it for this week than this question. I've thought about it a lot, and I'll be totally honest with you. I still haven't for sure made up my mind. Now, let me start by saying, when I was transcribing this over, one thing that I, for whatever reason, when I was typing it over, that I didn't include is that it said baseball stadiums, that we're at baseball stadiums. And so I'm assuming baseball games, not just events that happened at baseball stadiums, because then, that brings in other stuff too. So I've actually been super fortunate that in my life, I've seen 2 very, very famous events live in person. And I was looking at the person when the live event happened. Because, sometimes you could be at a game and, you look away for a second, and that's right when, Steph Curry makes the record-breaking three-pointer or something, right? But I was able to see 2 events where I'm looking at the person when it happened. Now, I was at the Oakland Coliseum with my dad in the 3rd deck when Derek Jeter made the flip play to Jorge Posada swipe tag, and Jeremy Giambi was absolutely out at home. Anybody who says otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. My dad and I were watching that. Now, we were a long ways away, so we saw him streaking across the mound, cut the ball off and flip it. And I know there's already people yelling at the screen going, he cut it off, it actually slowed it down, he was safe, that play is a fraud. Okay, whatever. But we saw it, and it was amazing. And when it first happened, we weren't even 100% sure. Mike Mussina was on the mound, and we weren't 100% sure from our vantage point that it was Jeter or Mussina that ran over and cut off, because he was out of position to do it. Where he would have been and where he was, it was like, wait, why is he there? So I saw the Jeter flip play with my own eyes. I will never forget it. And the Oakland Coliseum went from absolutely roaring with excitement when they thought he was going to be safe to quiet as heck with, a few of us Yankee fans going nuts at the stadium. So that was very, very cool that I got to see. Another thing I got to see was very, very cool is on the 18th hole of the U.S. Open, when Tiger Woods is down 1 with 1 to play, and he makes the long, winding putt that curls in to tie Rocco Mediate to force a playoff on Monday of the U.S. Open, which was the last U.S. Open that Tiger Woods has won. It was the last major that he won before he won that Masters a few years ago. So I was in the grandstands. My wife and I went down, and man, what was that, like 2007, something like that, at Torrey Pines, when he made that putt. You know, the one where he's got the double fist pump and he's going crazy. He's got the double fist pump going. We got in the gates when they opened. We went straight to the 18th grandstand, and we sat in the 18th grandstand all day and watched the players come in, knowing there was going to be a dramatic finish, but no idea that we were going to see that. And I got to tell you, when that putt went in, it was the loudest roar I've ever heard in my life. And literally, those grandstands were like they were like shaking like an earthquake. It was out of control. So I've gotten to see 2 like super famous events. So to your question, 3 events at baseball stadiums. So again, I still haven't 100% decided on my answers, but I'm just going to go with this right now. So the first one I know, the first one is easy. The first one is Lou Gehrig giving his speech at his farewell. The Lou Gehrig speech, where, I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth. That speech, 100% is one of my 3. So I absolutely would have wanted to be there for that. And then, a lot of people say that the Babe Ruth called shot, it didn't happen. And it was like, he didn't really do that. And then there's like some grainy video, and you're like, no, this is so, but I think I have to go with Babe Ruth's called shot. I have to go with that. I mean, Yankee fan in a baseball stadium, so we're talking baseball events. It's a pretty famous event. So then the next one is much harder. It's much more difficult to come up with what my third one would be. And I kind of go back and forth on this. Because things that go through my mind, I'm a Clemens fan. So when he strikes out 20 in a game, that would have been cool. But I don't think that is on the list. I saw Clemens throw a shutout at the Oakland Coliseum, complete game shutout one time. That was cool. Then I think about, Hank Aaron's home run to break, Babe Ruth's record. I think about the Pete Rose hit to be the all-time hit king. I think about Roger Maris breaking the single season record and all of the uproar that had. So now I'm just listing a bunch, trying to buy myself time. It would have been really, really interesting to be at the game, at Jackie Robinson's first game, and just see the dynamics of how that played out. And because that was that 1947? Because I think, if I remember this correctly, I think that the story is that it was April 15th, 1947 because that was the day my uncle was born. I'm pretty sure my uncle was born on the day that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, which I know his birthday was April 15th, and I know he was born in 1947, so I'm pretty sure it was April 15th, 1947, and just how that must have gone. And to be a fly on the wall to see that would have been really interesting. The thing about a lot of these events that I've listed, though, is it's like a moment, right? It's like the moment Jeter flipped the play, the moment Tiger's putt went down, the moment the ball left the park, the moment that Lou Gehrig walks up to the microphone. But the Jackie Robinson thing isn't like a moment. It's like a whole afternoon event, right? So it's not like this one moment where Bobby Thompson hits a home run. It's not it's not a single second. Although watching Ricky Henderson steal that base and get up and declare that he's the greatest of all time, that would have been pretty interesting. I think I would have no. And it's so crazy how this happens. It's so crazy how this happens, how you'll just be talking and then something will pop in my head and I'm like, oh, no, it's that. And I don't even know what made me think of this just now. I'm a huge Willie Mays fan, big Willie Mays fan. And there's a book written by a guy who was at the game where Willie Mays made his over-the-shoulder catch. And he describes the whole afternoon from getting into the park to how the whole day unfolded. And I've read it. And for some reason, I'm blanking on the name right now. Somebody will put it in the comments below, I'm sure. I think I would go. Would I go to that? No, I want to be at the Jackie Robinson game. I think it would be too important of an event to not go to that. Jackie Robinson, breaking the color barrier, watching him play that day, seeing how that all unfolded. Final answer, third choice. There it is.
I'm a Nolan Ryan collector. Been collecting him since 1988. I was only 8 years old, but the 1988 classic card, Nolan Knows Bo, is the card that got me started. My ex-wife at the time, bought me a 1968 Nolan Ryan. She knew it was what I always wanted. She bought it in a pro-graded slab, now defunct, in a 10 pristine grade. The card did look perfect. After the divorce, I put all my stuff in my parents' house, and that card stayed there for 15 years. I finally had my dad mail me the card. I cracked it out and sent it to SGC. It got an SGC 7, which I was disappointed about at first, but a 7 still seemed to be worth $2,500 to $3,000. I was adamant that it was at least an 8, so I cracked it out and submitted it to PSA. Came back evidence of trimming. I was like, what the heck? I submitted back to SGC, and now this time came back evidence of trimming. I sent it to CGC and came back altered authentic. Can you make a video or segment of a video to warn against this? I would say it mainly affects vintage cards. Looking back, I should have kept it in the SGC 7 slab, sent it to PSA to see if it can cross over. If it didn't, I still had a 7. Warn people to think twice about cracking a vintage card out to see if it can be a better grade. Either keep it as is, or send it as a crossover or resubmit to SGC using the review service. I'm still upset about this to this day, and it's been nearly a year. Thanks.
So, yeah, I mean, and I even did a video on this myself, and I could put a link to it in the description below. But I bought a 1951 Whitey Ford rookie card and it was in a third-party holder. And so I decided, I'm gonna move it over to like an SGC slab or PSA or something. And as soon as I cracked it out and I gave it a really good look over to take a look and see what I thought it would grade at, I noticed that it seemed like there was some color added up in the blue in the bill of his cap. And again, I have a whole video on the whole experience. And then I was like, oh no, like now it's not in the holder because the holder had given it, the third party company had given it a 2. And all of a sudden I have a card that I think is maybe altered. I don't want to sell an altered card to someone without saying it was altered, but I don't want to sell it as altered if it wasn't altered. And now I think it's going to get an altered and it's not in a holder. And I literally went through this exact same situation myself. And I was like, I thought about it for a while and I was just like, well, what do I do? So what I ended up doing is I called the company that the holder was in. And I explained the situation and I took pictures and I showed them the slab and how I had just cracked it out. And the guy could not have been cooler. And I ended up talking to the owner of the company. And he said, hey, you tell me what you paid for it. Show me proof that that's what you paid for it. And I'm going to go ahead and refund you the amount that you paid. So I sent him my eBay invoice and he PayPal'd me the amount that I paid for the card. And I got super lucky. But as technology changes, as standards change, as companies change, as we go from one company to another, and the equipment and the opinions and the expertise that they all have, this is definitely a possibility that you could buy a holdered card that is actually altered. I mean, there's no doubt that there have been cards that have been altered and slipped through the cracks for every company. It would be impossible for these companies to have never missed an altered card. Now, I know they try really hard and most of them are very good about it, but there are definitely altered cards in holders. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. So if you're ever thinking about moving a card over and you think there's any chance that you could have an altered card, any chance, you really should look more at a crossover than doing a full crack out and send it in. And from personal experience, and the experience that he's sharing right here is evidence that this happens. So I wouldn't crack a card out of a slab unless you are certain that it wasn't altered and would never come back altered. That's just based on the experience I've been through. I got lucky. In this situation for me, but it doesn't always work out that way. So no doubt about it, people get really they just break out those pliers and start cracking cards out, and we have to slow down a little bit sometimes and think about what you might be doing and what you might be doing to the value of a card, because without any doubt, there are cards in every brand holder that have been altered and just weren't caught. And there is no doubt that if you crack something out and send it in, this could happen. So we just need to include that into the cost, benefit, risk analysis of the situation before we do it. Now, 6 awesome questions, right? 5 hopefully decent responses. And if you have a question for an upcoming episode, please, down below in the comments, simply type your question. I look forward, as always, to hearing what you all are interested in and what you all have to say about my comments today and about what you might want to hear me answer coming down the road. I've got a couple of cool videos coming up very soon over the weekend. Probably going to be Friday. I've got a great video from a card show that I went to last weekend with my dad. I'm working on finishing up the editing right now on that card show. I definitely spent some money and I definitely bought some stuff. I think you might be surprised at some of the stuff that I bought. And then probably on Sunday is what it's looking like. I'm going to be posting that video of all of your pickups from the month of November. I had over 40 people sent me a picture of their favorite pickup from November, and there were some monster cards that you all picked up during November. And I can't wait to show you what some of the fellow midlifers picked up in November.